was.
That's why you have the books.
Well, I went to the book, and I determined that, but it didn't say anything about a crockpot. I thought maybe it was an exception or something.
No, so
Okay.
unless there's a logic to say so, usually go with your logic.
Okay, good.
You go with your straight, train of mind. That is that, yes, whoever did that obviously did not know. Was not aware even before.
If you find that situation, then
Yeah. So did the
Okay, now-
evidence? So was the kugel good? Did it taste good?
Okay, so then there was a question, can we eat it? So I looked deep into the book, and I saw
How
one.
good was it?
The kugel,
Yeah.
it was delicious, Mrs. Marzel's kugel. Okay, and I that was a question. Can we eat it? Could maybe only the guy who did it could not eat
That
it?
is that we discussed.
Pressing meat. I
That,
thought.
the Diavad, a person who transgressed Hatmana, even though it says in the Gemara in Shulchan Aruch that the food is asur, that is only if it wasn't half cooked before Shabbos. If it was half cooked before Shabbos, then we're able to be lenient. On the other hand, though, since it did get heated up, so there's another shaila based on that. If you can benefit from the fact that it got heated in a forbidden way, the best thing would be just to wait for it to cool off and then to serve it, so you don't benefit from the forbidden heating.
Okay, so we were covered on all ends, because by the time it got taken off, by the time I noticed, I tasted it myself, it was cooled down. Yes! And and this is a lesson. 3 rabbis in the place, in our davening, and
Don't confuse rabbis with a Moed Hera.
Okay.
It's very two different terms.
I had like 4 opinions.
That's like confusing someone with a PhD with a medical doctor. Well, there's nothing to do with the other. You have pulpit rabbis and you have poskim. They're 2 different things. Okay. We're middle of the laws of Mukseh. As we know, we've been doing this for months. I think months, if I remember correctly. And we were midst of the laws of Klisha Malach to the Isser. And anybody remember where we got up to? We didn't discuss.
We finished the expensive items.
No, that I know for sure we finished. That's for certain.
I
don't remember how
fuzzy.
far we got.
I was fuzzy.
Okay, so we're going to just review again from the beginning of Klisha Malach to the Isser and take it from there. But I'll bring up a question on Mukseh and Kiss that was brought up this week before Shabbos regarding a passport. I think we did discuss this, by the way, but let's see what you guys would say. Is a passport Mukseh on Shabbos? Tudat Zahut, any identification card.
I would say yes. But
use your information, glean your information from Mukseh, Machas, Chesron, and Kiss, and the novelty we explained in the Alter Rebbe's opinion, how we explained his opinion in the matter.
I don't know. I'm assuming it's a
Remember,
situation.
let's go through this. We said that Mukseh, Machas, Chesron, and Kiss, in order for it to be Mukseh, according to the Alter Rebbe, it must fulfill 2 conditions. Condition 1, it must be Klisha Malach to the Isser, which is our topic of today. Meaning it must be designated for forbidden use. Condition 2, that it's important to the point that you will not do any other action with it due to fear of it getting damaged. I think certainly an identification card would fall, that's hard to get, would fall under the second condition. But what about the first condition? Is it designated for forbidden use?
Probably yes and probably no. You can't travel with
so
it, but you can't identify yourself if a policeman...
So the poskim of the previous generation dealt with this question, and they have differences of opinion. But the truth is, let's analyze it from the rules that we want. Let's use. Remember, I said before, we're not going to go through every single example on Earth of items that exist, and if it's Mukseh, we'll go through a number of them. But the main thing is to get the rules and be able for everybody here to be able to implement them on their own. So, in an area, let's take a passport. What is a passport mainly used for? Most people don't use it for identification. They use a driver's license. They use other forms of identification on their passport. The passport they keep very safe if they need to travel somewhere. So, here in Israel, you don't need a passport to vote.
No, they do use it as a means of identification, but it's not
I understand, but that's not going to be your first choice. If someone tells you bring identification, you're going to bring your passport. I would never bring my passport. I don't want to take a chance of getting lost.
I mean, if someone doesn't have other...
I understand. You're right. Theoretically, you're correct. The question is, in actuality, what are people using? Not the passport, okay? So now, in a place, in cities, and there are cities like this that they require people to carry identification, that would basically mean foreigners would have to carry their passport. then, it's something that they would be using on Shabbos all the time because they need it. But other than those specific situations, then a passport would generally not be used on Shabbos. So now we go back to does it fulfill condition 1. Condition 1 is that it's designated for forbidden use. What's the forbidden use? What am I doing with the passport? It's electric. What am I doing with it? I'm not doing anything forbidden with it. It's not. So the truth is that even reading on Shabbos is forbidden. We're going to learn this in Klishim Lachta L'Isser.
Even reading?
Yes. On Shabbos you can only read certain things. It's not a free for all. You can't read, you can't read everything you want.
Water bill. Right.
Correct. You cannot read a water bill. Yes. First of all, Agmas Nefesh. That's one of the reasons why Rav Moshe held that you're not allowed to read sports on Shabbos. What if your team lost? No, it's not. No, he's being straight honest. If your Shabbos is ruined. The whole Shabbos you're going to be talking about, you're going to be so upset. He said it's a chashash of reading things that are sad, that are distressful. And so too with politics, you read that your candidate lost. It's very sad. We'll heading into these things. So in any event, so there are certain things that it's forbidden to read on Shabbos. But also besides it, coming as a nurse from the room when we get to volume 3, made a limitation against reading certain things. And a passport does not fall under that unless it's something that you need, as I said before. If it's something like, on the street, they're going to stop you and ask for identification, then it would be something else. But since it's not something very common, then the leaning approach would be that a passport is Mukseh on Shabbos, unless you are in an area that you are required to carry identification.
On Shabbos.
Worried that it could be stolen.
Yeah, that would make it less of a Mukseh status. If you're worried it's going to be stolen, we discussed this in the past regarding the rules of Mukseh. Let's say we discussed this in our own. You can always put it into a pocket. It's not like this type of pocket, but a pocket that's sewn like this, and leave it in this pocket the whole Shabbos and walk around with it with a neighbor.
Oh, that was it.
But that wouldn't solve the Mukseh issue. Okay, so Klishim Lachta L'Isser, we began this 2 weeks ago.
Just one quick question. Reading the pocket that's sewn, a pocket that's separate from the pant leg?
Like this.
What does it matter if it's...
We're going to get to that in about another 50 pages.
So the
So
passport
what's the
is
final
Mukseh, you
answer?
said. You said lenient, it is, what did you say?
I gave the different approaches to it, and I said that in a place where it's not necessary for you to carry it, then the logic would dictate that it would be Mukseh, because it has a prohibition against being read. So it's designated for a forbidden item. It's a little unclear, because on the other hand, you can say
You
people
can't
don't really read it. How many they look at the picture? How many of these cops actually sit down and analyze and read the information? It's just want a book. They see your picture. They see the passport. There's nothing wrong with looking at a picture on Shabbos. So it's but nonetheless, its main purpose is obviously for the information written on it. Passport without information, just your picture, would be worthless. Okay, Klishim Lachta L'Isser. So we already explained that a Klishim Lachta L'Isser is a vessel. It's one down from Mixum Machas Chesed Kiss.
And it's also because of reading?
Well,
That's just Malach.
that's why it's a
the
Klishim
Issur?
Lachta L'Isser, yes.
Okay.
And then since you're very particular with it, it goes up another step
Okay, yeah.
to the higher category of Mixum Machas Chesed
Okay.
Kiss. Okay, so Klishim Lachta L'Isser is basically just one step down from Mixum Machas Chesed Kiss. It's designated for forbidden use, but is not something you're particular about, such as we mentioned a hammer. You're not worried that your hammer is going to get ruined if you bang it on the wall. That's what a hammer's for. It's to ruin other things. You don't worry about it being ruined, right? So you're not particular about because you're not worried about any damage occurring. You couldn't care less if damage occurs. It's so cheap. It's so insignificant. Then even though it doesn't for forbidden use, it would be lower to this category of Klishim Lachta L'Isser. We will go through when we get to it a number of different examples. And here we're going to have a test exercise for all of us together to determine different items, whether they are the lower status, lower category of Klishim Lachta L'Isser, or they are the higher status of Mixum Machas Chesed Kiss. And we will see that from the time that the halach was written in the Talmud and Shulchan Aruch, certain things have changed. Remember, these things are objective. They're dependent on, are you particular or not particular? So just because back in the day people were particular doesn't mean we are today. And so to the opposite, just because back in the day people weren't particular, We're not particular doesn't mean we are not today. So we're going to see this coming up. Well, what's the halacha klishim lachta l'isur? So this is what we stated already, that it's permitted to be, it's a very low status of mukseh. It's one of the lowest categories of mukseh that there is. Again, this is to negate the misunderstanding that everything that's mukseh can't be moved. No, there's categories. It depends on the category. If it's a higher category, like Mukseh Matchanskus, which we learned about, it's correct. It can't be moved for any purpose. If it's a lower category, like this category right now, it may be moved, but its removing is restricted. What are the restrictions? You can move it for anything you want, except for saving from damage. That's the only thing you cannot move it from. So if your hammer is outside and it's about to rain, and you want to save it from getting rained on and getting rusty, you cannot move it. If an asteroid is coming from heaven directed at your hammer, you cannot move it, right? Very common cases. But if you want to move it because it's in the way, it's in the way. I don't want my hammer on my table, or I want to use it to break open this bottle that iced over Shabbos, and I want to open it up so I can get the liquid underneath, so I can take a hammer and smash it on top of the bottle. Or I want to break open a nut. So all these things are a permitted use on Shabbos, and I'm allowed to use a kli shemalachta l'isur for a permitted use. The Chachamim never restricted it to that extent.
What if your original kavana is that you're worried about the hammer, you want to save it?
Right. So we definitely did this as well, right, in halacha 12, and we explained that by kli shemalachta l'isur there is a permitted trick that you can do. That you can, in truth, your purpose and intent of moving the kli shemalachta l'isur item is to save it from damage, which you're afraid may occur to it, but you will then go ahead and make a use of it, or go ahead and use its space, fulfilling one of the permissible ways of moving, and it would be mutter, even though deep down you know and God knows that you're moving it to save from damage. It's still mutter, because in the end of the day, you did use it for something. You did use its space for something.
I remember the halacha that says that if you don't, this is the machlokas, you don't have another, you can't use anything else. I have a nutcracker and I have a hammer.
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. That's not in the Right now we're going through everything in the Alter Rebbe. We're going to go through other additional questions that come up.
So why is it also to use it for its own sake, to move it for its own sake?
For what?
To protect it.
Right, so the Hebrew terms that, by the way, are used for this, just so you get familiar with them, is legufay, lemkeme, and la'atzma. Legufay means to make a use of it, to take the hammer and smash open a nut. Lemkeme is to use its space, and la'atzma is for its own sake, too. So it's not for any ulterior motive, it's for it itself to save it from damage. Now, why did the sages make the restriction specifically saving from damage? And we discussed this 2 weeks ago, and my answer hasn't changed, and that was that I'm not really sure. It's not explained in the Gemara or in the Shulchan Aruch of why the Chachamim specifically made it to save from damage. And I think what you can say is the reason is because it's the least necessary, it's the least common of the three usages, and therefore, since this is a very low status mukseh, the Chachamim they made only a very bare minimum restriction, but that's just hypothetical. I don't know. Anybody want to give an attempted explanation? That's fine.
But I would debate whether it's the least. I would say the fear of the damage would be
if you are using
common.
an item more often to save it from damage than for its actual use, don't purchase it. How often do you need to move an item to save it from damage? I mean, even in a house with kids.
On a Wednesday afternoon, you're concerned about your hammer being out in the rain.
I understand. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying, what's more common of the usage?
I don't know.
You're not sure?
Depends on your anxiety levels and your personality type.
Well, the Chachamim spoke the majority of people.
Goldstein, 100 years ago, a hammer would have been much more precious than it is now. And it could be that people...
By the way, I'm not sure about that. I don't know. Why do you say that?
Because today we can go to the store and purchase one very easily, but 100 or 200 years ago they didn't have hardware stores like we have nowadays. So
You could make one yourself.
Yeah.
Take a stone, take a piece of wood.
But also, what if it's someone like is using it as an avodah? this is avodah, so he's a greater concern for it than an average person.
Right, so very good point, and that's what we mentioned in the laws of Mukseh and Kiss. We already mentioned that a special chisel, which people are very particular about, it's made in a specific way. It's manufactured with specifications that are not easy to find. Then in such a case, yes, it would go up to Mukseh and Kiss. And yes, I do agree with you that if somebody bought a hammer that has these specifications that it's used only for this and these items, then yes, it could enter into Mukseh and Kiss depending on what its main usage is for. But in the situation of a hammer, as the Gemara itself says, most people didn't view it as an expensive item that they're very particular about not doing anything else with because it may get damage. Okay. We're going to now read in Halacha Chaf Beis. This is, I believe, what we were up to, and this is going to Shin Ches Chaf Beis 308:22, and this is going to go into the Talmudic discussion of the Gemara in Shabbos, page 18, in regards to whether it is permissible to move a Mukseh item through placing, I'm going to use the Talmudic words and then we'll go to the other words, a child or bread on the item. Is there such a trick? Does this exist? If I have a Mukseh item or a Klishim Lachtalis here we're dealing with, and I put, that's what I mentioned, the Gemara in Shabbos 18. So, right, when David HaMelech passed away, so Shlomo HaMelech asked the Chacham what to do with the body, and he was instructed you can place a baby, not suggested, by the way, or a loaf of bread on the body to be able to move it. But in truth, anything that's not Mukseh would fall under this category. Why they use the baby as an example, it's kind of strange, especially that this case example is talking about a grinder. Not very smart to put a baby in a grinder. Let's see. Halacha Chaf Beis. Meducha. Im yesh bashum v'kayetze b'hay. A grinder, back in the day, of course, we're talking about a mechanical grinder, but the truth is it makes no difference. A grinder is meant to do a malacha, which is called grinding on Shabbos, so it's obviously designated for forbidden use. So electricity didn't add anything to that. It's designated for forbidden use regardless. Im yesh bashum, if it contains garlic inside of it and the like, it is permitted to be moved. Why? You can even move it, save it from damage, even though it's a vessel isn't for forbidden use. A general rule that we're now learning, leading up to getting to our discussion of placing a baby in a grinder, as we'll see, is that it is permitted to move a item that's designated for forbidden use if it contains food inside, as its main purpose and point is the food. So therefore, we don't see the Mukseh item; we only see the food. So if I left food outside in a pot, right? An empty pot is Klishim Lachal Isser. What is a pot designated for? Cooking. Cooking. You can't cook on Shabbos. So normally I am restricted from moving a pot to save it from damage. We mentioned this example 2 weeks ago. If a child, you woke up in the morning to hearing banging, you run out of your bed, see what's going on. You see your 3-year-old kid took out all the pots from the drawer and is using a hammer to smash them. You see a dent here, a dent there, and you're losing all your, hundreds of dollars worth of pots. On Shabbos, so during the week you can move it, but on Shabbos you cannot move it because you're moving to save from damage. You have to do one of the other tricks. You can move the child away. You can, put something in its place. You have to use one of the other tricks that we mentioned, or move with the shinoi. But if the pot has food inside of it, then it's considered nullified to the food, and if so, it's no longer a status of Mukseh.
So a practical example, a blender with mayonnaise in it.
Anything with food in it. Yeah.
Food processor with food.
Anything that contains food in it, it is no longer Mukseh. Now, if you have a blender that's 2 different pieces, you have the machinery and then you have that plastic container, I'm not sure if the whole thing would be viewed as food just because the plastic container has food in it. Certainly the plastic container can be picked up and moved. But would we say you can move the whole thing? It's an interesting question. Maybe yes. It's right now attached. You can see it's considered one item. Okay.
So the fact that it's an instrument that has to be that can't be used it's a prohibited use instrument. forget about the food that was in it. Does that make it the highest level of Mukseh alone, even without the worry that it could be damaged? Is that the highest
No,
Mukseh?
why would it be the highest? It's only the highest if you're particular not to use it for anything else.
So you have to have both of those things, to
Always.
have the highest.
To be the highest, you always need
Prohibited use and worry.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
So just like the pot is secondary to the food that's in it, so we follow the food, which is not Mukseh, obviously. So to the grinder is not Mukseh if it contains garlic or other foods that are crushed inside of it. Notice from the wording of the Alter, it seems that it wouldn't work for a person to do a trick and put some, go on Shabbos and put some onions, take whole onions and put it in his garlic so we can now move the grinder, because we're referring to things that are ground. That's where it's meant to be. It's a possibility of how to be medayik from Alter. Anyways, it seems you cannot do that from the wording here. It wouldn't help to do a trick and just suddenly, put food inside on Shabbos just for the sake of it becoming nullified to the food. Because in such a case, why are you putting the food in there for the sake of the grinder, not the opposite? So it's kind of, contradicts the logic here. You can move it even for no need at all. If a person went ahead and place inside of it a loaf of bread or a child, a shadvam, hamatan betiltul, or anything else that's not mukseh, you put a pair of clothing inside. That the grinder is not secondary to them, it's not something that's meant to be ground inside of it. It doesn't help. And this is a general rule. Let's say the only case that the sages gave a permission to move a Mukseh item, to placing a non-Mukseh item on top of it, meaning I'm holding on to the Mukseh item and on top of it is a non-Mukseh item, and therefore I can move the Mukseh item with the non-Mukseh item, is in the case of a body. As in such a case, if the body is in the sun, it can start smelling and corroding, and because of Kved HaMeis, the sages allowed it to be moved with a non-Mukseh item on it. Or let's say it's in the, so therefore you can move it from the sun to the shade, and so on and so forth, in cases necessary for the respect of the dead.
What do you mean only the body? The garlic in the grinder is okay too.
Yeah, but that we explain. That's because there's an interconnection between the two.
Okay, so only when so
there's no interconnection between babies and dead people.
Okay. So,
or a loaf of bread and a dead person, right? This
loaf
is
of bread and a grinder would be okay, even though you don't.
Something like this. Even though we agree that a grinder or a pot that contains food that has been crushed in it, that has been cooked in it, we look at only the food and not the grinder. That's because that's the pot and grinder are serving the food. That's what they're there for. But if a person goes ahead and starts stuffing clothing in his grinder, or put a pair of shoes in his grinder, to be able to move it, no, it's worthless. Only by a mace does it help that the fact you have something not mukseh on top of the mukseh, now you can move the mukseh. But in general, there is no such rule. It is forbidden to do so according to this opinion. The Yesh Chalkim, not everyone agrees. The Yesh Chalkim, there are those who argue and rule, also, the this second opinion, which is the opinion of the Raven, one of the Gedolei Rishonim Ashkenaz, one of the Bali Atesvis, and the opinion of the Rashba, is that it is permitted to move Klisha Malachta le'isr level muksahs if a non-muksah item is on top of it. So here we're learning another trick. Before we learned you can move the hammer out of the rain if you want to use it, if for the sake of saving from damage, if you go ahead and use its space, or go ahead and use it suddenly to crack open a nut. Now we're learning something else. You can take something not muksah, put it on top of the hammer, and then you'll be allowed to move the hammer according to the second opinion. This is a machlokes on the poskim of whether the kika or tinik trick, the bread or the child, which is, we're using really anything that's not muksah, can help you to be allowed to move a klish machlis or muksah. And the final ruling is that the main opinion follows the former approach. One may not do so. In the case of a great loss, you may be lenient. So whenever you have a klish machlis or item that's in the way of damage, you can go ahead and use this trick. So what can you do with our waking up in the morning hearing pot banging case, take the child, put him in the pot, and move it together.
According to the second opinion, can you put the clothes in the grinder? That work, according to the second opinion, where
Yes,
you put the
and
clothes
the
in the
way we
grinder.
rule is that only in a case of great loss. If it's to prevent from great loss, you can do it.
That means that the grinder would have to be banged on with the kid or in the rain or
Whatever,
something?
yeah, whatever, that
In the
would cause a
kitchen,
great loss.
in the kitchen, the clothes in the grinder wouldn't work. It's safe and sound. It's not.
If it's safe, it doesn't help. You just want to move it because it's, well, if it's a klishim, it's a mukseh machzor and kiss, everyone agrees it doesn't work. This ability of placing a non-muksayim, tav muksayim is only by klishim nachle isser status items.
A prohibited item.
Special heter for the lower category mukseh.
If it's a prohibited item, an item prohibited.
Simply that's for forbidden use, and you're not particular to use of other things. Okay. Halacha 13. We already read this inside regarding a different issue, so we're just going to review it outside. Sifyud Gimel. Once you pick up a mukseh machzor, a klishim lachtil isser item for its space, you want to use it, you have to put it down right away. The Alter Rebbe here rules that if you picked it up in a permissible way, you were allowed to pick it up, it was mutter, like to use its space, you can then go ahead and put it down wherever you choose. You don't have to put it down right away, even though you said you already freed up the space. The purpose of movement has already been accomplished. Why you continue now to walk with it, to put it in the closet? You're obviously trying to save it from damage. You now want to move it to save from damage. The answer is no, since you picked it up already in a permissible way, it is permitted to continue and bring it to a destination.
Bring it upstairs, 10 rooms outside.
Wherever you want.
Well,
Okay.
like the wallet, so that's not the same
A
category.
wallet is not mukseh, it's not klishim lachtil isser. A wallet is designated for keeping money, and money is severe category of mukseh.
Yeah, but on Shabbos, we understood that if you had the wallet in your pocket, because you can move, if it's it's moving in a shinui way, you can
No,
walk with
it's
the
not
wallet.
because it's shiny. It's as if you're not moving it. It's not considered on you.
Oh.
That's the pocket had to. We'll discuss that in length when we get to it. It's a very complex case situation. Okay, moving a klishim nachlis item for the sake of another person. If somebody asks me to move it, can I move it for him? So the Alter Rebbe here, let's go to Halacha Lamed Gimel, says the following. The second part of the paragraph. Umikan yatzatos haman shemataton neshalim l'tzeich adlokas motzi Shabbos. L'tzeich nachshed ken la'atzmai v'tayim hem she'enim mutal tanti. He's talking about here that people would move a candle for the sake of Motzi Shabbos, which is in and of itself has a problem of preparing from Shabbos to after Shabbos, but is also here a problem of Mukseh. As when a person moves a candle for the sake of Motzi Shabbos, or for the sake of a guy, even if the guy is going to light it, let's say a guy is sitting down next to me, he says, do you mind passing the candle? I would like to light it. Now there's no problem for a guy to light a candle on Shabbos for his own use. Or let's say you have a box of matches sitting in front of you, and you're sitting with a guy on Shabbos. He asks you to pass down the box of matches so he can light his cigarettes. So box of matches is klishim lachtil isser. It's doesn't forbidden use, and we're not particular how much does a box of matches cost. So in such a case, seemingly it should be permitted for me to move it, as it's being moved for a use. The question is the use of a Gentile considered a use? The Alter Rebbe here rules that it's forbidden. You can only move it for the sake of another Jew to use on Shabbos. So number one, we learned from here three things. Number one, we learned that it is permitted to move a klishim nachtil isser item, even if it's for the sake of another person. The other person is the one who needs the space. The other person is the one who wants to make a use for it. I don't have to say, well, you're the one who wants to make a use of it, then you have to be the one to move it. Let's take a practical example. A person has an itch down his back, and you're sitting right in front of a pencil. A pencil is a klishim lachtil isser item, and you ask him if he can move, if he can pass it to you. What are you talking about? It's a mukseh. How can I? So first you explain to him it's a klishim lachtil isser in the different categories, and therefore it's okay. So you got through that. He says, okay, so you move it. It's for your back. I have to scratch your back. I have to move it for your back. But then this is where this comes out. That even for another Jew, it's permitted for klishim lachtil isser. Now, if he says, well, how do you know you're Jewish? Then you can know you're stuck with this guy. So, in a case that somebody else mutter, but the second point that we learn, for the sake of a Gentile, it is not allowed to be done. The guy has to get it himself. You cannot move it for him. And also, of course, for after Shabbos, it wouldn't help, even if for somehow, some reason it doesn't transgress for Purim. For Shabbos after Shabbos, it would still have a Mukseh problem of being moved to be used after Shabbos. Okay, now we're going to start going through a number of examples that are recorded here. We can do this together and figure out what their categories should be. This is our Mukseh exercise class that we're doing now. We have to attach all the information we learned. These are examples brought in the Shulchan Aruch, and then we're going to go to other practical examples. Most of these examples are brought in the Gemara. So an axe and a sledgehammer, we already determined those items, that they're considered klish malachta l'isser, so they may be moved for a person's space or to use, with exception to a very specific type of hammer, which is people are particular about, and therefore would go up a category, would not be able to be moved. A wick. Shabbos Chanukah, you have a box of wicks that were lying around your table. What are they? To move or not to move? I need the space. To move or not to move?
Okay, so it's certainly a prohibited item, an item for prohibited use.
That's obvious, yes.
And
does it go a step up?
Do you care about it so much that you're worried about listen, there are a dime a dozen wicks, I would imagine. No.
Yeah, wicks are definitely not something people are mostly particular about, and therefore is not is lower category mukseh, klish malachta l'isser, and you can take it off the table. However, if you have a cup with wicks that you took out of the menorah that are already used, and you want to throw them in the garbage, but they weren't thrown in the garbage yet, and they're sitting on your table, those are completely mukseh. Those cannot be, because they're not designated, they're not anymore a kli. A wick that has a potential future use is currently a vessel designated for forbidden use, which you're not particular about, so you can move it. A wick that has been already used and has no future use anymore now goes to a higher category of mukseh, which is called mukseh machas gufa. We didn't learn it yet. It's considered useless. It's not a kli, and therefore you cannot move it. You can move with a shina, right? You can pick up the cup with your teeth. You can do many different acrobatics.
If by the Lubavitch customary to use a wick again, then
So
it's
it all
long
depends.
enough to
If
use,
your
so
intent-
it's mixed with others, and you want to throw them out.
Again, the wicks that you plan on using in are mixed with new wicks.
Not new wicks, but wicks that are usable.
You can't use wicks that are usable or mixed with wicks that are not usable.
Yeah.
So okay, so then we fall under the question of what do you do when you have mukseh and non-mukseh mixed together, which is, we're going to get to that. It's a whole discussion, very interesting and lengthy and complex discussion towards the end of the book.
So a used wick that you're not going to use again, you can't say it's an item for prohibited use because you're simply not going to
Designated
use it.
for prohibited use. It's not designated for any use.
Mm-hmm.
It's garbage.
It's
What
useless.
use is it designated for?
Yeah.
It's not designated for a use. It's not a kli anymore.
So that makes it even more mukseh, you're saying.
Yep, that's mukseh machas gufa. We're going to get to that later.
Even if you're not concerned, obviously you're not
Okay.
concerned at all about it being,
Right.
okay, but just because it can't be used.
Musical instruments. So one of the case examples discussed in the Gemara is a shofar. Well, we can talk about all types of musical instruments, a piano, a violin, a guitar, a keyboard, you name it. What are they? So before I would look anywhere, what would we say, determine on our own before we look at what it says?
It's prohibited, so it's a prohibited use
Is
item.
it high category mukseh machas gufa, or is it low category klish malachta l'isser?
Depends how fancy, I guess. It certainly meets the prohibited use, but then are you concerned about it? Maybe it's like an incredibly
Okay,
expensive.
let's take a shofar. Well, anybody here on a shofar?
Yeah.
Do you do other things with it, like, I don't know, when you want to funnel something down a bottle, you take your shofar or something?
No.
Just because you don't want it going through a cow's horn, an animal's horn, hopefully not a cow, hopefully. Hopefully it's kosher, the shofar. But, or because you're particular, you don't want any damage happening to you. A small crack, and you can invalidate it, big machlekes rishonim. So seemingly I would say a shofar is something we're very particular about, very careful, we wrap it up very nicely. etc. And especially if you're talking about musical instruments, you should know how expensive musical instruments are.
I would say it depends, I mean.
What do you mean depends? How much does it cost to get a guitar? How much the regular guitar?
There's cheap guitars.
It's more,
Cheapest guitar. Instruments have a value.
it costs more.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Everything has a value. I'm not saying it's not $30. You can't pay $30.
Cheap guitar is $120.
When I looked
$1,000.
up in different stores, I went to 5 different websites of musical instruments. Now, it could be I was fooled and I went to the expensive ones, but all of them were very expensive. It was hundreds of dollars for musical instruments. Nothing there was cheap. Secondhand is something else. I'm talking about buying new.
How about a new guitar? It's about $120.
I'm talking about made in China
$50.
and breaks in China. I'm talking about something that lasts.
Okay, would seemingly be something you care about, so it would meet the double thing. It's
So
prohibited use,
seemingly
though, right?
it would be, of course, to play music on Shabbos.
And why'd you ask
A
the
Jew
question
can play
about
music
could it be
on
used?
Shabbos.
Why'd you ask
So
the
it
question
fulfills
about-
condition 1,
Yeah.
and if something you're particular about fulfills condition 2. I mean, would you allow someone to use the back of your guitar as a serving tray to serve food? All right. Would you allow someone to use your violin as I don't know to serve mashka or something? No, not just because it's not done, but because we're afraid that damage can happen to it. You know, a harp, it can have the strings torn and so on and so forth.
It's not a matter of prayer.
Logic.
It's also a matter of a person's
That too, correct.
respect.
Yes, 100%. So bottom line is that these things should be assumed to be a Mukseh. So let's see something a little strange. Al-Tibbe writes in Sifkaf. Let's see what he says.
That's the double high level Mukseh then, right?
V'chein ha-shoifer, that's what it seems like. And so to the shoifer, chatzitzis, or trumpets, the sharklei shir, and all other musical instruments, asla taltalam, so we're going good so far, it's forbidden to move them. Ki'im l'tzarech gufam ha'mekayimam, with exception to, if you want to make a use of it on Shabbos for permitted use, as I said, you need an extra serving tray, and the back of this guitar is perfect for that. To serve the food to the guests. Or you need the space. The guitar is sitting on my seat. Pick it up and get rid of it. As is the status, as is the law regarding any vessel that's forbidden use. Says it's forbidden to blow a shofar on Shabbos or to play music on Shabbos. So the truth is that this prohibition is not a biblical prohibition, and in fact, in the Beis HaMikdash, the Levian, those who didn't make it to the vocal choir, played musical instruments on Shabbos. No musical instruments on Shabbos. It's only an Issur d'Rabbanan. It's a rabbinical prohibition. As if it breaks, you may come to fix it. It's an Issur as a decree, a safeguard against transgressing tikkun kli. But in and of itself, the Torah does not prohibit music on Shabbos. Biblically. And that's why also, back in the day, when they had weddings take place Erev Shabbos and the meal took place Friday night, they would have goyim with musical instruments play music for the congregation at the wedding.
Why do they need the goyim? If they could do it, if it was permitted, why would they need
No,
goyim?
it's rabbanan. It's rabbinically forbidden to play music on Shabbos.
Okay.
So for a guy, tzarech mitzvah, shvus, and the rabbanan, they were lenient. Okay, but the point is that it's nonetheless also on Shabbos, so that would make it mukseh. But nonetheless, Al-Tibbe here says that it's a lower level mukseh, and seemingly he learns that people, this is based on the Gemara, that people are not particular to avoid using the musical instruments for other things. Now, would this apply today? It's kind of hard to think what change would there be between back then and today, that back then, let's just talk about a guitar or a violin. What else is it even usable for? What else are you going to do with a violin or a harp? What are you going to do with it other than play music?
You just said
What
turn
can
it
you
over
do
and
with
serve food on it, is what you said.
Yeah, how many people do such things? Even if it was cheap, how many? It's not something that's normal. You know, what would be its other normal usage? You know, and I can't imagine that these things were so cheap back then. What does it mean that people were not particular about it? So it's a little confusing. Practically, many of the malakdim of today do go ahead and write that we don't understand what happened back then and the attitude towards musical instruments, but certainly today we do know the attitude, and therefore it would be Mukseh machmas v'sar and kiss.
Higher level.
It would be higher level. Now, regarding a shofar, it depends. You have cheap shofars, you have expensive shofars. You have a shofar you can get for 80 shekel, you can have a shofar you can get for 400 shekel. So it would depend. If it's something that's, or you have also kid musical instruments, children musical instruments. not expensive, you're not so particular about them, so therefore they would be on the lower level. But something that is more expensive and you treat it with sacredness, you don't do anything else with it, then when they go up to be on the higher level.
Even without the prohibition, even though the fact that the prohibition is only rabbinic, which is a sort of a special case with musical instruments, the prohibition of actually using it is rabbinic, correct?
Correct.
So if it's, let's say if it wasn't even rabbinically permitted and it was permitted, but you have the extra concern, where does it fall then in the level of Mukseh?
If it was permitted?
It was permitted, but there's a great concern you could...
We already discussed that anything that doesn't fulfill condition 1 according to the Alter Rebbe is not Mukseh. And maybe that's we can maybe put in a few more other ingredients here to explain why even today it shouldn't be Musmach because maybe we can say, number 1, that it's also decorative. It's also used as something to, be part of the furniture of the home. A nice, beautiful guitar or a piano, right? Certainly a piano. Harp, right?
Because it can be enjoyed, that's a use.
Maybe that's another, we can say it's considered also a permitted use. As well, we can also say that a person who is not really a musician, that is, in tuned with his musical instrument, that he knows that any slight dent in the instrument will make his music come out differently than his intent. Then maybe such a person is not so particular if it, gets banged up a little bit. I don't know. I'm not sure as the place Gemara of today why back then it wasn't considered such an issue.
Because back then they weren't so attached to music they have today. You don't have a guitar, it doesn't matter. They didn't feel so connected to the music that they have today.
Unless it's a musician.
Huh?
Unless it's a musician.
What about the
music was something that wasn't
those who were? I mean, music has since the times of Tuval Kayin, right? Of Yuval, we've been playing music ever since then. Okay, we can leave that up for. But the bottom line is that halacha l'maisa, these things would be up to, subjective to the owner. How do you treat your violin? How do you treat your guitar? How do you treat your piano? Is this a toy piano? Is this a kid's piano? What is this? And the attitude towards its Mukseh status would be based on that.
Did you cover the picture on the wall item again?
We did that 2 weeks ago.
I understand
So according to Alter Rebbe, it's not designated for forbidden use. So it lost condition 1, so therefore it would not be Mukseh. Even again, all these things that we're saying, even if you're not particular, let's say kid's musical instrument, it would nonetheless still be a kli shemalach talis. It would still be that lower status of Mukseh. It just wouldn't be, the higher status. You can't move it at all.
The non-Alter Rebbe people came in and said they didn't care. They don't care about meeting both. If you get that opinion in your face, what do you do? Like there is an opinion that says that it doesn't have to meet both.
Correct.
That if you have a concern about the item, a very fancy picture that you're very scared.
So they hold it's Mukseh.
They would. Who's the they that would say that? We have to look out for
Names.
What?
You want names?
No. I mean, is the Mishnah Brura?
No, we don't have a Mishnah Brura. Not in this. The Mishnah Brura discusses regarding something else. It's possible to learn that way from the Mishnah Brura. Okay, a broom, that's our next example. So in the Shulchan Aruch, it's brought down in Siman, in Shinches, in 87, Pezayin, that brooms are Mukseh on Shabbos. Now let me give a little bit of background to this so we understand why today brooms are not Mukseh on Shabbos, even though it clearly says in the text that brooms are Mukseh on Shabbos.
It's the broom. The lines in the line. The old floor with the lines.
So, everyone agrees that it is a biblical prohibition to sweep on Shabbos an earth floor. If in the process of doing so, you will end up filling up ditches in the earth with earth and hence leveling the floor. It's forbidden to level a floor on Shabbos. You're walking and a piece of tile came out of your floor in your house, and you, while nobody's looking, turn to the right, turn to the left, you use your foot to slip it back in. Nobody saw, but God saw. That's an Isser, the Raisa of Baineh, building. It's forbidden to level things on Shabbos. So because of that, back in the day, most people had earth floors. When they swept, where were they sweeping? The earth floor. I don't really understand why. What are you accomplishing? What are you sweeping away the dirt? It's an earth floor. But nobody knows why they swept back then. I guess, earth, you have earth, and you have then, dirty diapers, bones. Remember back when you learned they would throw the bones on the floor? Gary names you have nice earth and disgusting
There's
earth.
some Mizrahi synagogues that have dirt floors.
Right.
I don't know if they still do today, but they did.
Right. Yeah.
The room making lines is never the issue then. It was always a building issue, the filling, the potential of filling
Yes,
that.
it's-
Making
it's-
lines is not the issue. You hear that too.
Lines?
I don't know, I remember hearing, you can't use the room because it'll make lines.
What lines?
That's what I
It's
mean.
in dirt,
In dirt, you make lines, but
you
they're
make-
it's the issue, the lines will be made and they'll be filled back in then, that's really
That's
the
not
point.
our issue. That's not our issue. You're saying it's because it's chayfer. No, that is not the issue brought regarding brooms and any of the texts that discuss it. The issue is that it levels the floor. That is the only issue that we are concerned about. Now,
The Lubavitchers are machmir then to sometimes use, even though there's no floors like that,
let's
to use
finish.
a mop-like.
Let's finish the subject. The question then comes up, I'm going through this so we can determine its Mukseh status, because don't forget that the laws of Mukseh are pretty much the culmination of learning all the other subjects of Hilchos Shabbos, because you can only determine if something's Mukseh if you know when something is forbidden to be done on Shabbos with this item. So here's a classic example. We have to first determine whether the use of a broom is allowed or not, and only then can we go up a step and say, what about Mukseh? Is it Mukseh or not? So the question then comes, so that's for certain. If you have an earth floor, you cannot sweep it on Shabbos. Very practical. If you have an earth front yard or backyard, and you're one of those people who sweep it, you cannot sweep it on Shabbos because of this reason. And if you say, well, I'm going to be very careful not to level anything, the Chum made a decree, you may not pay attention, it'll be inevitable, and therefore it's not allowed. So what about a tiled floor? Tiled floor, nothing's getting leveled when you sweep it. There's no holes that are going to get filled up necessarily. So here we have a major debate in the Rishonim and between the Mechaber and the Ramah. The Mechaber rules tiled floors, as rules the Rambam, is mutter to sweep on Shabbos. The reason for prohibition is inapplicable, so the prohibition is inapplicable. It's very simple. We don't have anything against brooms or sweeping. We have against filling tiles, filling holes. That will not occur in a tile floor. So he says it's mutter. So according to the Sfardim, a broom is mutter. You're allowed to use a broom to sweep on Shabbos, and therefore, of course, a broom is not mutter. However, the Ramah brings that we make a decree. If people were allowed to sweep on tiled floors, then they would say you're allowed to sweep on Shabbos. They wouldn't go ahead and start making this whole calculation that earth floors have a problem of leveling, tiles floor don't. They would think that the issue is just sweeping itself. So you see, sweeping is mutter, so I can sweep an earth floor as well. According to the Ramah, would be Asr, and therefore the ruling that's brought down here in 87, as we can see it inside, is that a broom is Mukseh on Shabbos.
From the Alter Rebbe?
Let's read it. Machbeidish shemechabdim b'makarka. The Hebrew term for a broom in Lashon HaKodesh is, in Hebrew, modern Hebrew, it's matateh. But in Lashon HaKodesh, it's machbeidis. Why? Because it honors the atmosphere, it honors the floor, it respects it, it cleans away the dirt. Shemechabdim b'makarka, in which what is used to clean the floor. They consider like a vessel designated for forbidden, they're considered like a vessel designated for permitted use, meaning not Mukseh, with divrei hamatirim, according to those who hold that you are allowed to sweep a tiled floor on Shabbos, which is the opinion of the Rambam and the Mechaber, as we already said. The truth is, I don't think we said that rule. That's an important rule. Let me go back a little bit. Okay, that we have to. I'm going to go back to that in a second. Bottom line is here brings the first approach. Brooms are not Mukseh on Shabbos. According to those opinions, which we already says the opinion of the Ramah, the Ashkenazi Rishonim who hold that it is forbidden to sweep even a tiled floor on Shabbos. Also, a taltlan. A broom is considered Mukseh. The lower level, Mukseh Klisha Malachta L'Isser. I don't think anyone is particular not to use the broom for anything else, right? The Gemara even brings people would also use their broom, and anyone know for what?
Smack their kids?
Yeah.
That's wild, yes.
Yeah. He's a good kid chaser. It's right here in your hands. They're being very annoying. So we see here Machais and Svardim and Ashkenaz. For a Svardi to move a broom is mutter. For Ashkenaz to move a broom would be aser.
I know that already. According to Ahmad, today it's allowed.
See, my rabbi would use a mop, like, a soft bottom. Remember in my original Chabad house?
Mops are also mukseh. It's forbidden to mop on Shabbos.
No, it wasn't like a stringy mop, but it was like a very soft, kind of like, almost like a cloth, not like a stringy mop, just like a cloth, soft thing. So that's okay.
So let's get our facts straight. So we brought over here. He just brought up the Rabbi Yosef says that today even for Ashkenazim it's mutter. Now, just like the Sephardim don't like when the Shach says that even for Sephardim it's mutter, we don't like when the Sephardim say even for Ashkenazim it's mutter. Let the Sephardim deal with the Sephardim, I'm going to deal with the Ashkenazim. And Shach says that it's mutter for Sephardim to, he brings the limitations, Sephardim regarding cooking and basar b'chal. Rabbi Yosef says that's his opinion. But for us, for Sephardim, he argues on the Shach. The Shach was an Ashkenazi. In any event, bottom line is like this. The Mishnah Berurah and a number of Paiskim, and this is halach l'maisa how we rule, bring that the entire decree that the Ramah mentions that we decree tiled floors due to untiled floors, due to earth floors, was only applicable in a time that majority of the city floors were untiled, as then people would come to this mistake. But if you live in a city, as in most of the modern world this is the case, that majority of floors are tiled, then the decree would not apply. Meaning, on earth floors, Sephardim, Ashkenazim, back then, today, we all agree you cannot sweep. But on tiled floors in city areas, if that's what the floors are made of, it would be mutter, even according to Ashkenazim. They never intended the decree in such a situation. So the Ashkenazi Paiskim back what Rav Avadia was saying, and we're all in agreement. That's why practically today a broom would not be Mukseh, because it's designated to sweep tiled floors, which is a permitted use on Shabbos, would be allowed. If somebody was living in a village that they don't yet have tiled floors, such as in many areas in Africa, or in areas in India, let's say he's a shliach there, right? Then he would not be allowed to sweep on Shabbos, even if he's one of the lucky ones who has a tiled floor. Because are you Ashkenazi? What a majority of the floors of the city. It's a problem. But in most modern countries that they have tiled floors, it would be mutter. So this is a change of psak from back then to today. So we see where the status of living changed for the better. The halach has
hard
changed.
floors when we say tiled.
It could be,
Because many places it's wood.
That's fine. Wood is also considered a tile in this regard, yeah.
Or rug.
Or a rug, yeah. Anything that's, not earth.
Not earth.
Yeah. Okay, now,
Rug, you don't have a problem with combing?
to sweep a rug, there's no issue of combing. The hair is not, it's not considered gedule karka. It's not like the hair of a body. It doesn't have an issue of tailish. No.
There's no conversation about the bristles of the broom coming out?
Yes, there is, and I was about to get to that. Brooms that are made of very flimsy materials, such as if you have one of those old school, I like to call them the witch brooms, because that's what I always associate them with. The straw brooms. I watched Wizard of Oz too many times as a kid, huh? So those brooms, since the strands break upon using them, so it's considered seiser, and it's a malach of seiser. So here it would be prohibited to use it for a totally different reason than the issue of sweeping, just because it causes the strands to break. But most brooms that are sold today in the market, whether they're synthetic, the synthetic strands, or they're made of like a rubbery material, since they do not break, meaning it's not inevitable, so therefore would not be mukseh, would be allowed to be used on Shabbos. So yes, a straw broom that is made in a way that, yes, it breaks off right away, they still sell them today, but I don't know how popular they are. Anyone still use them?
I've only seen them in camps in the mountain. Never seen them in someone's house.
Make it feel like old school, make it feel like, okay. What time is it? Okay, we're gonna end over here. Next week in Meretz Hashem, we're gonna begin with one very important piece of information that somehow got skipped here. Status of an item that's designated for permitted and forbidden use. It has two designations. Both permitted use and forbidden use. So we're gonna see that next week.